The desert stretched endlessly before him, a golden sea rippling under the fierce Egyptian sun. Dmitry Ivanov stood by the window of his modest hotel room in Cairo, gazing at the majestic silhouettes of the pyramids of Giza. To many, they were mere tourist attractions. To Dmitry, they were ancient riddles wrapped in stone. A renowned Russian historian, Dmitry had spent his entire career chasing facts, digging through the past to uncover logical truths. Religion, for him, had always been a byproduct of human imagination, a way for ancient civilizations to make sense of what they could not understand. He respected cultures, but belief? That was not his domain. Today was different. For the first time in decades, the Egyptian government had granted permission for an international team of researchers to explore hidden chambers deep within the pyramids. It was a rare and prestigious opportunity, and Dmitry had been chosen to lead part of the expedition. He felt both excitement and skepticism simmering beneath his composed exterior. Among the team members was a young woman named Alia Rama, an archaeologist from Bandung, Indonesia. Alia was strikingly intelligent, with a quiet confidence that made even seasoned academics listen. At first glance, Dmitry had underestimated her. He thought she would be another overly religious scholar, trying to inject belief into places where evidence should reign supreme. He wasn't wrong, at least partially. Alia specialized in Islamic archaeology and ancient civilizations. She believed history and religion were intertwined, two sides of the same coin. This belief often led to long, spirited debates between the two. Dmitry, Alia said one afternoon as they stood near the base of the Great Pyramid, inspecting a map. Have you ever considered the possibility that ancient civilizations had knowledge connected to divine teachings, even before formal religions as we know them emerged? Dmitry chuckled, the way a professor might laugh at an eager student. Pyramids predate Islam by thousands of years, Alia. No offense, but believing otherwise is more faith than fact. Alia only smiled, her eyes calm. History is not just a timeline. It's patterns. Messages left behind. Sometimes, the evidence is hidden beneath the obvious. Dmitry didn't argue. He respected her intelligence, even if he disagreed with her conclusions. There was something about her, her poise, her unwavering faith, that made it impossible to dismiss her completely. The expedition began with cautious excitement. The corridors inside the pyramid were narrow and suffocating, winding like the veins of some massive beast. Dmitry moved steadily, documenting every wall, every symbol, every chamber. This was his element: cold stone, ancient dust, and the pursuit of tangible evidence. But deeper inside, something unexpected began to unfold. The walls, typically adorned with well-known hieroglyphs, suddenly displayed unusual patterns. Symbols that didn't fit the typical ancient Egyptian narrative. Dmitry leaned closer, his heart pounding harder than usual. These weren't just decorations. They seemed like a hidden layer, an older story concealed beneath the official one. Dmitry, look at this! Alia's voice echoed in the cramped space. She was pointing at an eroded section of the wall where the limestone had chipped away. Beneath the faded hieroglyphs, new lines emerged, soft, curved, unlike anything they had catalogued before. He brought his flashlight closer. His breath caught in his throat. These weren't hieroglyphs. They looked disturbingly familiar. Not Greek. Not Latin. Arabic. No, that's not possible. Dmitry muttered under his breath. He wiped his eyes and looked again. The ancient script remained, mocking his disbelief. Alia stood quietly beside him, her expression unreadable. Maybe it's time you considered the possibility you always rejected, she said softly. Dmitry didn't respond. His mind was racing, trying to find a logical explanation. Was this some later addition? Graffiti from centuries ago? It had to be. Nothing else made sense. The team called in Dr. Yusuf, a local historian specializing in Islamic history, to examine the discovery. Dr. Yusuf studied the wall carefully under the light, running his fingers gently across the ancient stone. He frowned, then whispered, almost reverently, Subhanallah. Dmitry couldn't stand the suspense. What does it say? he demanded. Dr. Yusuf turned to him with wide eyes. La ilaha illallah. There is no God but Allah. The chamber fell into an eerie silence. Even the dust particles seemed to hang motionless in the air. Dmitri shook his head slowly. That can't be. Islam came thousands of years after these pyramids were built. Dr. Yusuf smiled sadly. The writing is beneath the layer of hieroglyphs, Dmitri. It's older. Much older. The historian felt the floor shift beneath his feet. His entire life had been built on the foundation of verifiable facts, timelines, archaeological evidence. And now, here he was, facing something that didn't fit any model he knew. Alia approached gently. You always said you were a man of evidence. What if this is evidence, Dmitri? Evidence that the truth is bigger than what we thought? He wanted to argue, to dismiss it all. But the weight of what he had seen, the ancient stone, the undeniable script, pressed down on him like the pyramid itself. For the first time in his career, Dmitri Ivanov didn't have an answer. Dmitri sat alone that night, the desert wind howling outside his tent like a chorus of lost souls. The discovery inside the pyramid had shattered the foundations of everything he believed. He stared blankly at the laptop screen before him. Pages of notes, diagrams, photos of the Arabic script buried under layers of hieroglyphs. All the evidence was right there. Yet his mind refused to accept it. It couldn't be. It shouldn't be. Maybe it was carved later, he whispered to himself. Maybe someone from the Islamic era secretly made their way into the pyramid and... But he knew even as he said it that it didn't add up. The writing was buried beneath thousands of years' worth of history. It was like finding a digital watch inside an ancient Roman tomb. The flap of the tent rustled gently. Alia stepped in, holding 2 cups of hot tea. She placed one carefully beside him and sat across without saying a word. The silence between them was heavy but not uncomfortable. Dmitri could feel her presence, calm and unwavering, like a lighthouse in the storm brewing inside him. Finally, he spoke. Alia, how do you stay so calm? Don't you realize what we've found could rewrite everything we know about human history? Alia smiled faintly. Because, Dmitri, for me, this discovery doesn't destroy anything. It only confirms what I already believe, that truth has always been here. Hidden. Waiting for hearts willing to see it. Dmitri rubbed his temples. But history is supposed to be based on logic. Science. Not faith. Alia leaned forward slightly, her voice gentle. And what if logic and faith are not enemies? What if they are 2 paths leading to the same truth? He shook his head, frustrated with her calmness, frustrated with himself. I need proof. I need more than just carvings. You'll find it, Alia said softly. If you truly seek it, you will find it. The next morning, the team began further scans of the pyramid walls using advanced spectrum technology. Dmitri was determined to find an explanation, a rational, tangible reason for the anomaly they had discovered. As the scanners buzzed and clicked, more hidden layers beneath the stone were revealed. And what emerged sent shivers down the spines of even the most skeptical researchers. Dozens of inscriptions. Not random graffiti. Consistent, deliberate phrases. All bearing an undeniable resemblance to early Arabic script. Phrases invoking the one God. Calls to prayer. Reminders of accountability after death. This is... Dmitri's voice caught in his throat. Dr. Yusuf placed a firm hand on his shoulder. You are looking at traces of monotheism older than any formal empire. Older than recorded religions as we know them. But how? Dmitri demanded, half angry, half pleading for someone to make sense of this madness. Dr. Yusuf answered patiently. Remember, Dmitri. Islam did not invent monotheism. It restored it. All prophets throughout history, from Adam to Noah, from Abraham to Moses to Jesus, called for the worship of one God. What if there were unknown messengers even before them, whose traces have been buried by time? Dmitri staggered back a step, feeling as if he were drowning in an ocean with no land in sight. He thought of the old books he had studied. The gaps in history. The unexplained common symbols across ancient civilizations. Had he been blind all these years? That night, Dmitri couldn't sleep. He wandered back to the pyramid under the starry desert sky, flashlight in hand. Inside, he retraced his steps through the narrow, suffocating corridors until he reached the hidden chamber. There, standing before the ancient stone once more, he hesitated. The symbols carved into the heart of the pyramid seemed almost to glow under the flashlight's beam. He reached out, hesitantly, and placed his palm flat against the cold stone surface. And then it happened. A vibration, a soft, almost imperceptible hum, traveled through his hand, up his arm, into his chest. His mind was flooded with images. A man in simple robes, teaching people to worship one unseen God. Followers gathering under the stars, whispering prayers in a tongue ancient yet somehow familiar. A civilization thriving not through polytheistic temples, but through simple, profound worship. Dmitri jerked his hand away, gasping. His heart raced, not from fear, but from an overwhelming sensation he couldn't explain. What was that? He whispered into the empty darkness. When he returned to the research tent, Alia and Dr. Yusuf were waiting for him, as if they somehow knew he would need them. You touched the stone, didn't you? Dr. Yusuf said quietly. Dmitri nodded. The ancients believed some places carry the echoes of truth, Alia said gently. Sometimes, when the heart is open, it can hear them. Dmitri sat down heavily on the nearest chair, burying his face in his hands. I don't know what to believe anymore. You don't have to decide tonight, Alia said softly. But you can't unsee what you have seen, Dmitri. You can't unfeel what you have felt. The historian who had come to Egypt to analyze dead stones now found himself confronting something very much alive, something ancient, powerful, and deeply personal. For the first time in his life, Dmitri Ivanov was not just studying history. He was becoming part of it. Days passed, but Dmitri's mind remained a battlefield. During the day, he threw himself into work, analyzing carvings, scanning walls, documenting findings with mechanical precision. But at night, when the desert winds howled against the tent and the stars blazed down like silent witnesses, the visions returned. The man in simple robes. The voices murmuring prayers. The sense of a truth too vast, too ancient to be ignored. He told himself it was stress, exhaustion, perhaps even a hallucination triggered by days spent inside the claustrophobic pyramid corridors. But deep down, Dmitri knew better. Something was calling him. One evening, unable to bear the turmoil any longer, Dmitri wandered outside the camp, away from the buzz of equipment and the chatter of researchers. He found himself by the banks of the Nile, watching the river flow silently under the silver moonlight. And there, sitting on a smooth stone, was Alia. She glanced up as he approached, her face illuminated by the soft glow of the stars. You couldn't sleep either? She asked gently. Dmitri shook his head and sat beside her, silent for a long moment. The cool night air wrapped around them like a cloak. I keep seeing things, he confessed finally, his voice hoarse. Visions. Feelings. It's like something is trying to tell me something. But it doesn't make sense. Alia listened without interrupting, her hands folded neatly in her lap. I'm a historian, he continued, almost angrily. I believe in facts, in carbon dating, in archaeological layers. I don't believe in spirits or messages from beyond. Maybe it's not about spirits, Alia said softly. Maybe it's about your heart finally waking up. Dmitri looked at her, surprised by the simplicity of her words. My heart has nothing to do with research, he said stubbornly. Doesn't it? Alia smiled faintly. You devoted your life to chasing truths buried under centuries of dust. You crossed continents, braved dangers, sacrificed comforts, all for what? A paycheck? Fame? No, Dmitri. You chase truth because your heart longs for it, even when your mind resists. Her words hit him harder than he expected. He stared out at the river, his throat tight. Truth, he murmured. But what is truth? Alia was silent for a moment, then said, Sometimes, Dmitri, the truth isn't just something you find. It's something that finds you. The next few days, Dmitri buried himself in study. He borrowed books from Dr. Yusuf, texts about the ancient prophets, Adam, Noah, Abraham, Moses, Jesus, and Muhammad, peace be upon them all. He read the Qur'an in translation, initially just to understand its historical context. But the more he read, the less it felt like studying history. And the more it felt like someone was speaking directly to him. Verses about the signs in nature, the creation of humanity, the call to worship one God, they resonated deep within him in a way no textbook ever had. At first, he tried to rationalize it. It's just beautiful language, he told himself. Poetry, nothing more. But poetry didn't usually leave him trembling with awe. One verse kept haunting him. We will show them our signs in the horizons and within themselves until it becomes clear to them that it is the truth. Qur'an 41:53. It was as if the book knew him, knew his struggle, knew his skepticism, and still invited him gently, patiently. One evening, as the sun dipped behind the dunes, casting the desert in a fiery orange glow, Dmitri found Alia sitting in the research tent, quietly reading. He hesitated at the entrance for a moment, then stepped inside. I read something, he said. Alia looked up, setting her book aside. What was it? He pulled a folded paper from his pocket, the verse from the Qur'an. He read it aloud, his voice unsteady. Alia listened, her eyes soft. It feels like... Dmitri struggled for words. Like, it's talking to me. Like it knows I'm looking, but I'm afraid. Alia smiled gently. Truth doesn't demand fear, Dmitri. It only invites understanding. He sat across from her, feeling as if he were standing on the edge of a cliff, unsure whether to leap or retreat. I don't know if I can do this, he admitted. My whole life, my reputation, my career, it's all built on skepticism. On logic. And you think becoming a Muslim means abandoning logic? Alia asked softly. Dmitri blinked. Doesn't it? Alia shook her head. Islam doesn't ask you to stop thinking, Dmitri. It asks you to start thinking with a broader heart. To use your reason, but also to listen to your soul. He buried his face in his hands, feeling the crushing weight of all his doubts, all his fears. What if I'm wrong? He whispered. Alia's voice was so gentle it was almost a prayer. What if you're right? Later that night, Dmitri sat outside under the stars, the Qur'an open on his lap. The camp was quiet. Only the soft hum of distant insects broke the stillness. He read, Indeed, in the creation of the heavens and the earth, and in the alternation of the night and the day, are signs for those of understanding. Qur'an 3:190. He closed his eyes, letting the words seep into him. Maybe it wasn't about abandoning logic. Maybe it was about embracing a deeper logic. A logic that recognized not just the stones and bones of history, but the living, breathing truth that pulsed through existence itself. A tear slid down his cheek. He didn't wipe it away. For the first time in his life, Dmitri Ivanov realized that some truths were not meant to be dug out of ancient tombs or uncovered by microscopes. Some truths were meant to be felt, to be lived. And perhaps, just perhaps, it was time to stop running from them. Dmitri stood on the terrace of his hotel, watching the sun rise over Cairo. The first rays of morning bathed the city in gold, and in the distance, the pyramids loomed like ancient sentinels keeping secrets older than memory itself. He hadn't slept much. His heart was heavy, but for the first time in years, it wasn't weighed down by doubt. It was the weight of a choice. A choice that would change everything. Later that morning, Dmitri found Alia and Dr. Yusuf discussing the next phase of their research near the excavation site. Seeing him approach, Alia smiled warmly. Good morning, Dmitri. Morning, he replied, his voice slightly hoarse. Dr. Yusuf studied him for a moment, then smiled knowingly. You look like a man carrying a question too heavy for one person to bear. Dmitri chuckled dryly. Maybe I am. He hesitated, glancing at Alia, then back at Dr. Yusuf. I've been thinking, Dmitri began slowly. About everything. About history, about belief, about the things I can't explain. Neither interrupted. They just listened, giving him space. I always thought truth was something you could touch, measure, record. But maybe. He paused, searching for the words. Maybe real truth is something you recognize, even when you can't fully explain it. Alia's eyes softened. Recognition is a sign of the heart's honesty, Dimitri. He smiled weakly. The problem is, I don't know how to move forward. I don't even know if I deserve to. Dr. Yusuf stepped forward. The truth isn't a reward for the deserving. It's a gift for the sincere. Dimitri swallowed hard. His hands trembled slightly, not from fear, but from the enormity of the step he was about to take. I want to understand, he whispered. I want to accept, but I don't know how. Alia and Dr. Yusuf exchanged a glance. Then Alia said softly, when you're ready, you don't need to understand everything. You just need to testify with your heart what you already know to be true. That afternoon, the three of them drove to a small mosque tucked away in a quiet corner of Cairo. It was nothing grand. No towering minarets, no ornate decorations. Just whitewashed walls, simple carpets, and the warm scent of old books and fresh incense. Perfect. Inside, the imam greeted them with a gentle smile, sensing immediately that today was not an ordinary visit. Dimitri's heart raced as he sat down on the prayer carpet. His mind screamed at him, reminding him of the life he was leaving behind, the reputation he might lose, the judgment he might face. But another voice, softer and stronger, whispered, "This is the truth you have been searching for all your life." The imam sat across from him, explaining patiently what the Shahidah was, the simple yet profound testimony that one God exists, and Muhammad, peace be upon him, is his final messenger. Dimitri nodded slowly. He was ready. The imam spoke the Arabic words first, slowly. Dimitri repeated after him, his voice trembling, eyes burning with unshed tears. I bear witness that there is no God but Allah, and I bear witness that Muhammad is the messenger of Allah. Silence filled the small mosque. A silence so pure, so profound, it felt almost tangible. Dimitri lowered his head, tears falling freely onto the carpet. A lifetime of skepticism, of walls built around his heart, crumbled in an instant. For the first time in his life, Dmitry Ivanov felt free. Alia smiled through misty eyes. Dr. Yusuf quietly murmured a prayer of gratitude. The imam embraced Dmitri warmly. Welcome to Islam, brother, he said softly. Later, as they sat in the courtyard drinking sweet mint tea, Alia turned to him. How do you feel? She asked. Dmitri laughed quietly, wiping his eyes. Like I've been carrying a mountain on my back for years, and now it's gone. She smiled. Because you finally listened to your heart. He looked at her, gratitude and something deeper shining in his eyes. Thank you, he said simply. Don't thank me, Alia said, shaking her head. The truth was always inside you. You just needed the courage to see it. The days that followed were some of the most peaceful Dmitri had ever known. He continued his research, but now he saw everything with new eyes. The layers of history, the rise and fall of civilizations, it was no longer just a dry academic pursuit. It was a living testament to a creator who had always been present, even when humanity forgot. And Alia remained by his side, not as a guide anymore, but as a companion. Their conversations, once filled with debates and challenges, now blossomed into long, thoughtful discussions about life, about faith, about the journey of the soul. Dmitri began to realize something else too, something he had pushed aside in the whirlwind of discovery and change. His heart was no longer just drawn to the truth Alia represented. It was drawn to her. One evening, as they sat beneath the stars once again by the Nile, Dmitri turned to her. Alia, he began hesitantly. She looked at him with those calm, steady eyes that had first challenged him, then comforted him, then changed him. I don't know what the future holds, he said, his voice thick with emotion. But I know this, wherever this path leads me, I want to walk it, with you. Alia's breath caught softly. She had felt the bond between them growing, unspoken but undeniable. She smiled, her voice barely a whisper. I would be honored. Months later, the scent of rain-soaked earth filled the air as Dimitri stepped off the plane in Bandung, Indonesia. The tropical warmth was a sharp contrast to Egypt's dry deserts, but Dimitri welcomed it. This land felt alive in a different way, a place of new beginnings. Beside him, Alia adjusted her hijab with a soft smile. She could sense his nervousness. You'll be fine, she whispered, touching his arm reassuringly. Dimitri managed a small smile. He had faced ancient tombs, deciphered lost civilizations, and confronted the collapse of everything he thought he knew. And yet, standing at the threshold of Alia's family home, he had never felt so vulnerable. Alia's home was simple but filled with warmth, white walls, wide windows, and the gentle hum of family life everywhere. Laughter floated from the kitchen, the smell of fried bananas and fresh tea filling the air. They entered the living room where Alia's parents were waiting, seated on a soft carpet. Her father, a tall man with kind eyes lined from years of wisdom, rose to greet them. Her mother stood beside him, her face calm but serious. Dimitri bowed respectfully, placing his hand over his heart, a gesture Alia had taught him. Alia's father gestured for them to sit. A brief silence settled, heavy but not uncomfortable. Finally, her father spoke. "What is your intention in coming here, son Dimitri?" he asked in steady Baisa, which Dr. Yusuf, standing nearby, quickly translated into Russian. Dimitri cleared his throat, his heart pounding like a drum. He had rehearsed this moment 1,000 times. But now, faced with it, he abandoned all rehearsed speeches and simply spoke from the heart. "I come," he said slowly, choosing every word with care, "with sincerity. I have found truth through your daughter's patience and through the journey Allah led me on. And today, I ask for her hand in marriage, not out of gratitude or admiration, but out of love and the desire to walk this path of faith together." A hush fell over the room. Alia's father studied Dimitri's face for a long moment. Dimitri met his gaze without flinching, his heart open. Then, slowly, a smile broke across the older man's face, a smile of deep relief and acceptance. He turned to Alia, who sat quietly, her cheeks tinged pink but her eyes shining with happiness. "You accept him, my daughter?" he asked gently. Alia lowered her gaze shyly and nodded. The room seemed to exhale all at once. A warmth filled the space, like sunlight after a long, uncertain storm. Alia's mother stepped forward, embracing her daughter first, then placing her hand briefly on Dimitri's arm, a simple but profound gesture of welcome. The weeks that followed were a flurry of preparations, modest but beautiful wedding arrangements steeped in Indonesian traditions. Dimitri marveled at every detail, the intricate batik cloth, the sweet dates served at gatherings, the sounds of Quranic recitation weaving through the air like a blessing. And through it all, Alia remained his anchor, calm, joyful, full of the quiet strength that had first drawn him across the invisible bridge from skepticism to belief. Their wedding day was simple, just as they both wanted. No grand hall, no lavish banquet, just family, a few close friends, and an imam who smiled as he guided them through their vows. Dimitri stood before Alia, his hand trembling slightly as he slipped a simple gold band onto her finger. "I promise," he whispered, "to walk this journey of faith with you, side by side, wherever Allah leads us." Alia's eyes shimmered with tears. "And I promise," she replied, "to remind you always of the light you first found in the darkness." The guests showered them with soft petals and warm prayers. And for Dimitri, the moment felt not like an end, but like the first true page of his life being written. In the days that followed, Dimitri found himself not just adjusting to a new life, but thriving in it. He continued his research, but now with a heart open to dimensions of history he had once ignored. He explored Islamic history with the same zeal he had once reserved for ancient ruins, uncovering connections that left him in awe. He also found peace in the simplest things. The call to prayer echoing through the streets. The laughter of Alia's younger cousins. The rhythm of life shaped not by ambition, but by purpose. One evening, as they sat together on the small rooftop of their home, watching the banding sky blush into twilight, Dimitri turned to Alia. "Do you ever think about how strange it is?" he asked. What do you mean? She replied, leaning her head lightly on his shoulder. That a man who spent his whole life chasing stones in deserts had to come all the way here, just to find what he was really searching for. Alia smiled, her voice barely above a whisper. Maybe it wasn't the stones you were chasing, Dimitri. Maybe it was always him. Dimitri closed his eyes, letting the peace of the moment wash over him. The stars blinked awake above them, ancient and patient. And for the first time in his life, Dmitry Ivanov understood. The greatest discovery was not buried in the sands of Egypt, not etched into ancient walls, not locked away in hidden chambers. It was in the surrender of a heart, in the quiet acceptance of truth, in the faith that burned brighter than any forgotten kingdom. And it was in the simple, profound words he now carried forever on his tongue and in his soul. There is no God but Allah, and Muhammad is his messenger.